If you're going to follow Buffett, you might as well start with Berkshire's largest holding. Apple is one of the biggest investments Buffett has ever made in a company, whether public or private. That speaks volumes about what Buffett thinks of Apple's business. The stock has risen over 400% since Berkshire initially purchased shares in late 2016. Apple is the most valuable brand in the world, according to Brand Finance's Global 500 list for 2022. The tech giant has sold millions of iPhones, iPads, and Macs, bringing its total base of active devices to 1.8 billion at the start of the year. Before we get into the news, I would like to welcome you to my channel. On this channel we look at the latest news surrounding Elon Musk and Tesla Cybertruck, to name a few. I would like to announce a giveaway I will be hosting. I will be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card, and all you have to do is subscribe and like the video, and make sure you watch till the end of the video. Now let's get into the news. The power of Apple's brand is on display through the growth of the services business. This includes sales of apps, subscriptions, iCloud storage plans, AppleCare protection plans, and more. Spending in these areas reflects a customer base that is heavily invested in the Apple ecosystem. On a trailing 12-month basis, revenue from services totaled $75 billion through the quarter ended in March, making up nearly 20% of Apple's total revenue. The services business is emerging as an important value driver for Apple since it generates double the gross margin as hardware. More sales of iPhones and Macs will create more demand for services. On that score, revenue grew 9% year-over-year in the fiscal second quarter ended March 26, driven by a record March quarter for iPhone, Mac, home products, and wearables. Apple has a powerful brand, a growing services business, and a $73 billion mountain of cash to invest in new products. That's why it can anchor anyone's portfolio. Now that we're in the heart of earnings season, investors are more than eager for their favorite companies to pull the curtain back and unveil their quarterly results. Market participants will finally get a clearer idea of how companies have sailed the rough economic waters we've found ourselves in. One of the most beloved stocks out there is Apple. Up more than 750%, shares of the tech titan have undoubtedly been one of the best places for investors to park their cash over the last decade. The share performance doesn't even compare with the S&P 500. Apple's slated to release quarterly results on July 28 after the trading session. The quarterly report will be watched like a hawk and will have widespread market effects. So, how does the tech titan shape up heading into the quarterly release? Let's take a closer look. Year to date, Apple shares have displayed a much higher level of valuable defense than the general market, declining just 13.5% versus the S&P 500's 16.5% decline. In fact, Apple shares have been much stronger than the general market for some time now, increasing nearly 4% over the last year, while the S&P 500 has lost almost 10% in value. The relatively strong share performance is undoubtedly a major positive. Buyers have defended Apple shares at a high level. Apple's forward earnings multiple resides on the higher side at 25.3 times, but is nowhere near highs of 41.5 times in 2020. In addition, shares trade at a 42% premium relative to the S&P 500. Apple has a style score of a C for value. Shares of Apple climbed higher on Wednesday, adding as much as 2.4% today. The stock was up 1.3%. The catalyst that sent the stock higher on a mixed market day was news that iPhone demand may be holding up better than investors expected, which could spell additional upside for the stock. After initiating supply chain checks in China, Wedbush analyst Daniel Ives concluded there have been steady with slight improvements, despite the zero-COVID-driven demand issues. The Chinese government has acted swiftly, initiating lockdowns for some of the country's largest cities to curb the spread of the pandemic, which has caused intermittent delays in the manufacturing sector. Apple has not been immune as the iPhone factories were temporarily shuttered earlier this year. However, Ives checks suggest iPhone sales could surprise to the upside. "We believe iPhone demand is holding up slightly better than expected," the analyst wrote, despite the various supply issues that have plagued Apple and the rest of the tech sector. Furthermore, Ives believes that worry over the iPhone supply chain and production issues should peak in the June quarter, giving way to optimism regarding the coming launch of the iPhone 14, which is expected this fall. Now what? It's important to note that any protracted economic downturn would weigh on the tech giant's stock, at least in the short term. With an average iPhone selling price of roughly $825, consumers would likely put off upgrading to the latest device, which in turn would pressure Apple's revenue. The iPhone is by far the biggest contributor to Apple's revenue. In the March quarter, iPhone sales topped $50.5 billion, up 5.4% year-over-year, accounting for roughly 52% of the company's total revenue. In the event of a recession, sales could temporarily stall, which would spook investors. That said, Apple dominates the global smartphone market, taking home roughly 44% of worldwide smartphone revenue last year. Additionally, with more than $192 billion in cash and marketable securities on its balance sheet, the company has the resources to weather any economic storm and should be viewed as a safe haven for investors with a long-term outlook. This earnings season comes against a backdrop of all kinds of economic worries, and market watchers are keeping a close eye on how the tech giants perform. Leading market participants can shape the stock market's narrative, hardly any more so than Apple. The world's biggest company by market cap reports F3Q, June quarter, results today after the closing bell. Despite macro uncertainties still impacting consumer spending, Deutsche Bank analyst Sidney Ho expects earnings to be largely in line with the firm and Street's estimates, showing year-over-year growth in the low single digits. While Apple has warned that supply chain snags are anticipated to impact the quarter's revenue haul by $4 billion to $8 billion, Ho thinks the company has managed its supply chain better than it thought it would. Our checks of delivery times show most products are immediately available with a few exceptions, notably new MacBook Air, hence we see upside to the expected constraints, the five-star analyst noted. Although consumer demand for smartphones and PS has waned on account of the difficult macro environment, going by data from third-party research firms, Ho is positive on Apple's share gains in the segment. That said, the period has also been marked by FX issues, which have become a bigger revenue headwind. Looking ahead, should Apple decide to provide any guidance, Ho thinks that as a reflection of the current operating climate, the company is likely to take a cautious approach and guide below present Deutsche Bank's expectations. However, Ho thinks the market is already factoring in slower growth and notes that in order to deal with a potential economic downturn, the company intends to slow hiring and cut back on growth initiatives. On the positive side, Ho sums up, Apple's strong cash balance should allow the company to remain aggressive in share repurchases. Overall, if you are looking for a good hiding place in a volatile market, Ho thinks Apple is the place to be. The analyst rates the tech giant a buy, backed by a $175 price target. The figure makes room for upside of 12% from current levels. And what about the rest of the street? It's mostly buys 22 in total, while an additional 6 holds are not enough to derail the strong buy consensus rating. The forecast calls for 12-month gains of 14%, considering the average price target stands at $179.53. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. I would appreciate it if you could subscribe and like the video, as it will help out the channel a lot. Make sure you do not forget to turn on notifications by pressing the bell icon so you do not miss the latest news surrounding Elon Musk and Tesla Cybertruck, to name a few.